Now, religionists, we're going to talk a little bit about the religions of ancient city-states. This is a critical phase in the evolution of human consciousness. We can think already of three areas of Stone Age: the Old, Middle, and New Stone Age. And at the end of the New Stone Age, we start to see agriculture emerging along rivers and irrigation and the like. And with that, we see settled establishments. Human beings, as it were expelled from Eden and now forced to toil and develop classes of human beings like nothing before. Now we have slavery as the workforce norm. Here are the four seats of ancient city-states, and there are no others really confirmed that I know about, and none literate until we get the civilization of Sumer. And Sumer will evolve into what we know as Babylon, which from the Bible we can see Babylon has a bad reputation from the Tower of Babel to the end, the book of Revelation. And why? We can see this in the myth, the story of Cain and Abel. Abel offers sheep offerings to God, and God accepts these, and the Israelites just happen to be sheep herders. And then Cain offers the crops from agricultural civilizations, and these God abhors, and so we can say the city slicker Cain kills his nomadic rural brother Abel. And with that, the Bible tells us that Cain's descendants went on to smith iron and all the like. So these four seats of civilization, by far the oldest, Sumer, has a literate culture by 4000 before the Common Era, or BC. And so we can see they all lie on rivers, because agriculture is dependent upon irrigation to create the masses of wealth and the increasing domiciles for the citizens, as well as now giant temples and the like. So we think about four principal rivers as seats of civilization. Of course, then we have the Tigris and Euphrates, modern-day Iraq, the Nile River in modern-day Egypt, and then we have the Indus Valley civilization, the Indus River in northwest India, and finally the Yellow River in China. And that's where we see writing emerge, laws, city walls, city-states, increasing trade, and one has to think maybe those cultures weren't so far removed even back 8,000 or so years ago, that they all emerge at the same time. Everywhere else is still living in the tribal phase of human religious and human, well, existence. So now we can see with this timeline of civilization, as I like to say, well, the Bible is hot off the presses. No one of my students can ever guess where the Bible, or really the word Israel, appears in the text from another nation. An Egyptian text names the state Israel, or the people Israel, the tribes of Israel, in 1100 before the Common Era. So all the writing in the Bible is not really codified fully until 400 before the Common Era. It is just not an old book, but within it is the literature of its predecessors, as it is with all cultures. And so we see Babylonian and Egyptian stories in the Bible and all kinds of mythological elements for sure. Here was the oikumene, the laws of the household, the economy, if you will, among these ancient city-states. This was all they knew, was the world we see depicted in this slide. And as far as that goes then, the real competition is between urbanites and rural dwellers, and hence that conflict, of course, continues to this day. With the emergence of hierarchical classes, civilizations then, we also see an incredible subjugation of women among the city-states of long ago. In the tribal phase, we often see women shamanesses, but at this point we will have temple prostitutes, male and female, but the high priesthood and the highest positions of religion now go to men, and as well, of course, the political sphere. In the laws of these ancient city-states, we can see the laws are much more harsh for women and slaves as well than they are for the big men, as the law code of Hammurabi calls the rich and powerful. When we're talking about Sumer, we're talking about 10 city-states. we can note that Abraham himself is said to come from the city of Ur. So in a way, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all three are technically speaking Babylonian religions. Now Sumer evolves into Babylon. No one knows, as far as I know, the origins of the people of Sumer. Their language is unlike any save perhaps the Dravidian languages of India. But with the Babylonians, we can see that Arabs, related language, Semitic language speakers, have infiltrated the entire empire, and now it becomes essentially a Semitic empire. When it comes to the religion of these city-states, well, we can see pretty standard things, emergent elements from the tribal religions, where the air is personified as Enlil, the great god. Inanna is the Lady of Heaven, the Queen of Heaven. We'll see the Queen of Heaven in every culture we study. And of course, the reason for that's quite simple. Everyone has a mother, I think. It's important to know, though this is controversial, that the ancients had a view of the cosmos as a flat disk. And we can see elements of this in the Bible itself. The book of Genesis talks about God setting forth a firmament, which means firmness. And if we read the book of Job, we'll see trap doors for snow, different ones for rain, and a third set for hail. So they lived in a different world than we do. When we look at our planet, it certainly looks flat. And when we look at the sky, perhaps as a kid like me, you thought it was a ceiling, and there's something beyond that. And that is where the gods dwell for these Babylonian people. 7 spheres, in fact, cover this disked earth, and each of those then evolve into the 7 heavens of much later fame. But these themselves are based upon the zodiac of the day. So 5 planets, sun and moon, make for 7. And so beyond the 7th rim of the universe lay mysteries, as they do for us today, before the Big Bang. As we talk about the queens of heaven in these cultures, note the big difference between this Venus of Willendorf here and then the sculpted face of Inanna, the Queen of Heaven. Certainly something has happened to the perception of women as time has shown humans evolved. So when we're talking about Sumer, we can think of many things. It's often asked, well, who invented the wheel? Sumer. And then who invented the harp? And that would be Sumer. Almost everything, the zodiac, astrology, the sciences, they all begin in Sumer. Maths, even the 0, known as a decimal point, was known to Babylonians. So it's hard to find any big ideas that didn't emerge in what is known as the cradle of civilization. And from there, it spread to these other river systems we discussed. Now, the most famous product of Sumer, Babylon, is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh, we're told, was the first king to develop a city wall. And why does a city need a city wall? It's to protect its riches from tribal nomads and the like. We're told that at some point in his career he meets this figure named Enki, who is a kind of monkey man representing perhaps the uncivilized tribal peoples outside the city walls. We're told that Gilgamesh and Enki wrestled for many days until finally Gilgamesh gets the clever idea to send Shamhat, the temple prostitute, to somehow tame that guy. Then they're friends, and we're told as well in the Epic of Gilgamesh the story of the Babylonian flood. In that flood, Utnapishtim, we're told, has a few goats on a raft to escape the Tigris-Euphrates rivers flooding. Nothing big like it becomes later in the Bible. And then Gilgamesh, in his search for immortality, meets Utnapishtim, tells him he will die, and has no idea why somehow Utnapishtim has managed to continue to live forever. So these are just a few elements in the Epic of Gilgamesh. But Also in the literate culture among these early city-states are legal codes. The first is that of Ur-Nammu, around 2200 before the Common Era. The law code of Ur-Nammu specified a set of laws for the big guys and then the little men, and different laws for women and men. And so we can see this dual system, and of course I always like to ask students, this doesn't happen anymore, does it? Big men don't get off more easily than little men today, thank the heavens, that things have changed and evolved for so much the better. Take a look at the law code of Hammurabi. If a little man kills a big man, he shall be publicly tortured and executed. If a big man kills a little man, he shall pay a fine. Raping a slave woman will cost you 5 shekels. So the law code of Hammurabi is, by comparison, relatively recent at around 1800 BCE, and at about the year we ascribe to this person Abraham, or was he a tribe of Abraham? Certainly described as a mercenary caravan driver. So now we took a glance at Sumer, Babylon. Now let's take a look at Egypt. And of course the river here is the Nile River. And it has its upper Nile, which is in fact literally higher than lower Nile, where the delta is. The northern part is lower, the southern part is the upper part. And here again we see the mother goddess. This time it is Almighty Isis. Isis then is married to Osiris, we're told was the first pharaoh. And Osiris is tricked by the desert god of the southern upper Nile, Set. He's tricked seemingly quite easily to our minds in the 21st century, but those olden people shouldn't be judged by our standards. I think that would be rather ridiculous. And so Set offers Osiris the chance to try on his new box, which just happens to be the same size as Osiris. Set puts him in the box, which is really a coffin, and then eventually, after several dramatic scenes, chops up Osiris's body and spreads it across the Fertile Crescent from Lebanon to Egypt. So Isis then begins the task with the help of another local goddess in Canaan to reassemble her husband's body. And she can find all the bits except for, well, one very important part if you want to make a baby. But in her case, it didn't matter. And so she gives the virgin birth to Horus, the god of the delta of the north. And Horus here with his falcon head, of course, is set to carry the sun around in his hands, looking to avenge the murder of his father, who now rules the underworld. And so the gods all convene for a big conference. Who's going to lead them all now that Osiris is gone? And so it becomes a contest between Horus and Set. And so we can say daylight versus nighttime and death. The desert has always meant death in the Abrahamic traditions. And so the scene commences whereby one of the two of them will inseminate the other. I don't think we have these contests to choose leaders today, but Set proceeds to brutally rape Horus and thinks that he has inseminated Horus, but in fact Horus, being the smarter guy of the big city delta, merely caught the semen and later throws it into the river. And so Horus, on the other hand, being the more clever of the two, sets his semen on the lettuce that Set likes so much. And then when the gods convene, Horus's semen yell, "We are here," from the Nile River, and Set's yell, we are here," because he had eaten the delicious lettuce he craves, and thus Horus becomes king of the gods and the new pharaoh. And you better believe these old gods don't die out. We just have to look at that all-seeing eye over our pyramid on the dollar bill. One won't find it in the Bible, but one will find it as part of the Egyptian mystical traditions of the masons, and originating through the eye of Horus. We do also have in this phase little glimpses of things to come. There is the famous so-called monotheism of Akhenaten, and Akhenaten thought the transcendent Aten, the sun itself, was a disk, the giver of life and all things. I don't think he was so far off, really. And he emerges erasing all the old standard city-state gods representing death, the gods of the air, the sun, and all of this, and established the Aten as the only worshipable god, and named his son Tutankhaten. But upon Akhenaten's death, the priests of Amun then restore the henotheistic plurality of gods as it was known in the day, and this will last until, again, the Axial Age, as Karl Jaspers taught us, in the middle of the first millennium BCE. That is when monotheism will catch on in the preaching of the Hebrew prophets. Now, civilization doesn't spread to Northern Europe for quite some, I can say, millennia. The Germans and the Russians are going to be last there with the Mongolians and the like, at least in the Eurasian continent, if you will. But civilization does spread further south. Not only does it spread to India and China, but it spreads south to Nubia and the like. And then we see, of course, most importantly for our purposes, the emergence of writing and the cuneiform or wedge-shaped letters made by the people of Sumer evolve into a writing system on clay tablets. And I always like to tell students I'm glad to see tablets and scrolling are back. And now it looks like the book's the one in trouble. Those clay tablets last forever, and so we know quite a bit about the peoples of Sumer and Babylon. These clay-shaped abstract alphabets then will spread all to the Phoenicians on the coast, who will take it around the Mediterranean, where it will also then infect, if we want to see literacy as a virus, infect the Greeks, and we can see the relationship of so many alphabets. You'd be surprised and amazed to note that Arabic, Hindi, all of these alphabetical languages have a common ancestor in the clay tablets of Sumer. And today, of course, we can see the Latin alphabet, the one most in Europe and the United States, Canada, and the like, and for that matter, well, the Western Hemisphere, really, has tended to dominate those Romans. Now, there's an important invasion to note. I often like to say religions are spread not through love and kindness, but often through war and economic greed, and psychological hatreds and the like. And so, many don't know about these so-called Aryans. This is a term the Kurgan tribespeople gave to their noble classes. And unlike Hitler thought, they were not blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. In fact, they conquered the blonde-haired, blue-eyed peoples of Europe. We can see remnants of pre-Aryan, pre-Indo-European. It's such a touchy term, isn't it? And many Hindus and Indians aren't going to agree with me that there was this conquest, but the linguistic evidence is overwhelming. And as well, we can see the spread of the chariot from their homeland near the Black and Caspian Sea all the way across to India, China, and spreading as well through Europe. And they established their class with the priests at the top and then the slaves at the bottom throughout many of these nations. So the Druid priests and the Brahmin priests of India have something in common. As well, we can see just in ancient Sanskrit terms, very many similarities with modern English. We can see the word for nose is nasa, teeth are danta, and then I bet I don't have to translate matar, bratar, and duhitar is worth a note. The milk maiden is the Tochter in German, or the daughter in English. So that was her job in their tribe's civilization. Now, often with the barbarian invasions, of course, we see the barbarians are not more civilized, of course, than the cities they conquer. Au contraire, The barbarians have merely developed effective new weaponry, and in this case it was the chariot. And we'll see the Mongols doing the same with stirrups and rockets and the like. The Germans, sadly, did a good job. And of course, that most dread empire of them all, in my humble opinion, the British. And so we see in the myths of these Aryans and their father god, Deus Pitar in Sanskrit, and Jupiter in Latin, and Zeus Pater, and then there's the little-known Germanic Tiwas Vater of Tuesday fame, are all sky fathers coming from this tribal source. The Aryans do not develop things like Stonehenge, and there are the lost Beaker people civilization in Europe now. We know them by their distinctive pottery, but alas, being illiterate, we don't know their language. Some like to think perhaps Basque or Albanian might be remnant pre-Indo-European or Aryan or Kurgan languages. And the first empire of these Aryans are peoples known as the Hittites, and their chariots are described as massive 20-foot tall village pounders. From the Hittites, as well as from the Egyptians, we see the emergence through the Minoan civilization of Greek civilization. And there, as in many of these cultures, we see a battle of the old gods, the Titans in this case, with the new young whippersnappers. Is it a sign of the emergence of these tribal invaders, of dominating the local tribal gods? Who knows that one? But the truth is, we start to see then the religions mirror the city-state. So we can imagine Zeus is the mayor of the city, then we can guess our Ares as the Department of War, and Hephaestus of industry, and on in that manner. And then, of course, the legacy of Greek religion is vast. The original man in the sky isn't really Jehovah, but it is indeed Zeus. And known for hurling his thunderbolts, his true form was in fact lightning itself, the thunderbolt. Was he a model character? No. He was a cheater on his wife, a rapist, a murderer. And we could go on and on about the naughty things Zeus does. He will get scrubbed up, but he will live on in Christian tradition in no other way than as a model for depictions of Jehovah, which no Jew or Muslim, of course, believes is permissible at all. But when Michelangelo wanted to paint Jehovah, or God, well, all he had as a model, really, he thought, was Zeus. There was one thing beyond Zeus's control, though, and those were the three fates of past, present, and future. And only one man, one God-man, the Son of God himself, could ever defy the decree of the fates. So this divine man descended into Hades, the underworld, confronted Hades, the god himself, and then, rather than dying below, was raised and exalted to the very heavens, where today Hercules is the constellation itself. Those people thought of stars like we do. Think of television or our computer screens. It's what you watch all the time, and these are divine beings on, again, a firm sealing of the world. Virgin births are very popular. Dionysus, we can think Athena, born from a super headache of Zeus, and then Aphrodite, born on the foam of the ocean from heaven and his testicles when time, Kronos, kills Uranus in the oldest of times. We can see in particular with Aphrodite and her son Eros later depictions of Christ with his mother. These will be exactly patterned on the old Greek pagan artworks. And so when we look at the 12 gods and goddesses of the Greeks, we see each has a partner, a male and female element. That'll be paralleled in the Indian and Hindu traditions as well. We see 12 is the magic number for tribes of Israel, and on and on. 12 are the constellations we see in the zodiac. And then when we think of these 12 Olympians, Think as well how they mirror human personality types. When I took the Greek god or goddess are you quiz, I scored Hermes, and I do like to cause trouble and talk a lot. Others, we can see the Herculean, well, Zeus himself, the father god, and then we can see the vixeny Aphrodite, and the rather aloof and introverted Artemis, and on and on. We see the mirroring of human consciousness projected onto the heavens in all these religions of ancient city-states. And just as, well, we hinted at some features Jesus shares with Hercules, the descent into Hades, which isn't in the New Testament, and ascension to heaven, which is in the New Testament, then we can also see elements like Dionysus, who turns water into wine, and of course Hermes was known as the Good Shepherd. So many elements are incorporated, just like Christmas trees, into later Christian tradition. And so we see also the appearance from India to Greece, well, and on, feminine gods like Krishna or Dionysus, who drive women crazy, believe it or not, and then masculine gods like Hercules and Rama, who are super at killing demons. That seems to be their principal job. Those, however, who scoff at Christianity for incorporating earlier pagan elements into its traditions really are missing the boat when it comes to understanding religion. Because there is no pure religion. Every religion has absorbed something prior to itself and woven a new tapestry out of the original ingredients. And so in no wise can we say Christianity is exactly patterned on the old Greek religions. And on the other hand, we can't say it's some kind of pure Judaism, that's for sure. And then it is the Axial Age again, middle of the first millennium before the Common Era, again when pan-ethnic empires emerge, that we get the great thinkers simultaneously, Confucius, the Buddha, and Socrates, notably for Jaspers, but really the prophet Isaiah has a monotheistic vision. These new religious awarenesses then appeal to anyone. Now we're well beyond the tribe. We're well beyond just the city-state where Athena guards Athens and the like. Now we see the development of religions and philosophies that truly could be accepted by anyone from anywhere on the planet, and they are to this day. And for the Europeans, that Axial Age figure is none other than Socrates. He is the first really to teach what was deemed a kind of atheism, that the Greek gods were fictional, frankly bad role models, and that in fact the world was comprised of a divine consciousness, and that our souls reincarnated and all that. A view shared with Hindus, but also the Indo-Europeans again seem to have this reincarnation view. So Socrates' questioning of the old ways, the old views, the old philosophies, of course, resulted in his execution in Athens, where he drinks the hemlock rather than forsake his views. And then at the same time, Buddha will be challenging the efficacy of the Hindu gods, and likewise Confucius will be looking to organize Chinese society in a very secular and immanental, or this worldly kind of way, bypassing the old gods of the ancient city-state.